Hey guys, there's 4 things I'd like you to consider whenever you deal with your bicycle chain. So let's get into them. Okay guys, here are the 4 things I want you to consider about your bicycle chains. First of all, counterfeits. Second, compatibility. Third, master links. And fourth, directional versus non-directional. Now, counterfeits are everywhere. I bought a chain a couple months ago. Everything looked fine, put it on my bike, and in no time, the chain was completely worn out. I couldn't believe it. So I got looking at it more closely, and basically, I'd bought a counterfeit chain. The chain looked and initially worked fine, but because it was such low quality, it just disintegrated very quickly on the bike. So there are counterfeits, I believe, everywhere with all the major brands. The best way to spot a counterfeit is based on price. Let me show you. So here's a reputable online bike retailer, Northwest Bikes, and they have a KMC X9 chain listed for 33 bucks. However, if you go on AliExpress, they're selling an X9 KMC chain for under half that, 15 bucks. Now, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty certain that KMC chain on AliExpress isn't the same quality or the same type of chain as the one that I showed you on the Northwest bicycle site. As a matter of fact, KMC has had such a problem with counterfeit chains, they have a section of their website devoted to explaining counterfeit chains. Here's part of that website. It basically shows that there's a fake product alert. They go in and explain that their X series, the chains I just showed you above, have been particularly susceptible to this type of counterfeit. They show you what to look for on the chain to see if you have a counterfeit chain. And they also show you the packaging before you even open the chain up, what you can look at and get a pretty good sense as to whether or not the chain is a counterfeit chain. Now, this just isn't affecting KMC. It's all chains. You really need to be careful. As a matter of fact, KMC's recommendation is that they recommend you to buy only from good specialist dealers or from trustworthy online sources. I agree. Next thing let's talk about is chain compatibility. And basically, chains, even though they are for one-speed drivetrain, they may be compatible with other speed drivetrains. And let's get into it a little bit to tell you what I'm talking about. Basically, a 9-speed chain is much wider than a 12-speed chain, and that only makes sense. The tooth width on the chain ring is 2 millimeters, and that's basically all bikes have the same chain ring, and all the chain rings basically are 2 millimeters. Now, cassettes have different tooth widths. You know, a 9-speed tooth width is a little bit wider than a 12-speed cassette tooth width. But since the chain rings are the same, it really doesn't matter what the cassette tooth width is. What matters is the chain width in the chain ring. Now, the cog spacing on the cassette does make a difference. A 9-speed is basically 4.35 millimeters. It gets narrower as you go up to a 12-speed, and a 12-speed is about 3.5 millimeters, cog spacing. Now, the implications for all of this is that the limitation on the cassette is cog spacing, and that means a 12-speed chain will work on a 12-speed drivetrain and lower. But a 9-speed chain will work on a 9-speed, but it will not work on anything above a 9-speed. Now, in practice, what you can do is very easily use a 10-speed chain on a 9-speed drivetrain. And you can use an 11 and a 12, but the 10 will work best and work very similarly or exactly like the 9-speed. But as you get up, they may not work quite as well. Now, Shimano CUES actually is very interesting. That's a new drivetrain Shimano came out with a while ago. And the CUES are designed around a 9, 10, 11 speed drivetrain. and they only have one chain for all the drivetrains. And that chain is designed around an 11-speed chain. So here's an acknowledgement that chains are compatible, and the CUES system is a good indication of that. So just be aware, if you've got two bikes, one's a 9-speed, one's a 10-speed, you don't have to buy 9-speed chains and 10-speed chains. You can just buy 10-speed chains and run them on both bikes and be fine. Now, the next thing I want to talk about are master links. When you buy the chain and open it up, you're going to have a master link, and right away you're going to question, can I reuse the old master links? Now, there are designated by the manufacturer non-reusable master links and reusable master links. A reusable master link, the manufacturer will tell you, can be used 3 to 5 times. The non-reusable, basically they indicate it can only be used once. However, regardless of the designation, I often reuse the master links, and I think a lot of people do. But I think you can probably get away with it pretty easily if you're using a master link or reusing a master link on a 9 or 10 speed setup. But as you get up to an 11 and 12, because of the tolerances, it's probably not going to be work out as well if you reuse it. But you can reuse it, so just be aware of that. If you mess up and put on the master link, but you need to realize after you put in the master link, you need to take out some links. You don't necessarily need a new master link. You can just unsnap it, take the links out, and use that same master link. Now, let's talk about whether chains are directional or non-directional. Basically, some chains are directional and some are non-directional. Let me give you an example of a directional chain. So a pretty typical drivetrain would be a 2023 Shimano XT drivetrain. That drivetrain has a specific chain, a CN M8100 chain. That chain's directional. The SRAM Eagle chains, all of those chains, they're directional. CUES that we talked about a minute ago, that chain is directional. However, non-directional chains typically are 8 or 9 speed drivetrain. Also, many of the KMC replacement chains are non-directional, but many of the higher end or some of the high end KMC chains are directional. Now, if you're not sure, here's a good rule of thumb. If you got the chain out and you see a logo on one side of the chain and no logo on the other side, that's a directional chain. If you look and you see a logo on both sides of the chain, that's probably a non-directional chain. If you have a directional chain, it's very important to install it in the direction in the direction it's supposed to be installed in. Otherwise, the drivetrain probably won't work properly and the chain will probably be worn out more quickly. Normally, the chain will direct you to install it with the logo facing out away from the bike. So, that's what I wanted to tell you. Make sure you consider about chains. I hope I've given you guys something to think about, and I'll see you at the top.